Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session today. My name is Flavia Richardson, and every month I'm very fortunate to introduce many guests from experts in our field to founders and investors. At Juice Ventures, we focus on financing direct to consumer businesses while providing them with hands on digital marketing support and most importantly, an amazing network of partners. Today, it's really my pleasure to introduce Jermaine Edwards. Jermaine is an amazing expert in his own right. He has built more than four businesses, successful businesses in the UK and the US, and has spent the past 10 years managing very large sales team across GE, Dell, and Gartner, and now is advising many high growth companies in our ecosystem. Most importantly, Jermaine is an author and has been featured in many publications worldwide. The topic today is really around attrition. Many of us in the ecosystem advise companies or work with companies that tend to focus on user acquisition, sometimes putting attrition on the sidelines. So I think it's very important, and I'm glad that Jermaine is joining me today because it's about discussing when should companies start thinking about loyalty, engagement, and really reducing the number of customers they're losing. So Jermaine, welcome to our monthly session, and most importantly, it is a pleasure that you're able to share with us your insight. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Flavia. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I recognize with all those established founders out there and those aspiring founders or those on growth trajectories are actually looking at their business differently and wanting to better understand how they can actually serve their customers better, more efficiently, more effectively, but ultimately sharing that growth journey with their customers also. So happy to be here and support with some insights. I'm wondering, obviously, as we go through this, let me just offer some context here around this unshakable loyalty, because I think we're in a particular time where actually there is more competition than ever, and actually the distractions to our customers and being able to better see what's on offer based on what's out in the marketplace, both locally and globally now, is prolific. We're seeing literally tens of thousands of advertisements from our phones and otherwise telling us to go and do something else other than what we're serving our customers with at the moment. So how do we ensure that we have unshakable loyalty? So we're going to talk about some really interesting, unconventional ways, three specifically in terms of really cutting attrition or ensuring that we're keeping more of those customers over a period of time. But I think also what we're going to have us think about today is really the mindset behind loyalty and attrition and how we can actually feed that philosophy and the principles behind that to really inform and influence the way we think about our engagement with customers also. So I want to get started and jump into the content because of the time that we have in today. So let me get started with this. So what is specifically is customer loyalty? I think this is an important conversation because actually there's still a lot of debate here. There's still a lot of exploration. It's still wildly, despite the last 30 years of conversation around customers, it's still an ongoing conversation. But let me just offer this today, that loyalty is not when a customer says yes to buy from you again. I think that's a kind of a wide misnomer because we should not conflate commitment and convenience. The convenience of somebody purchasing or the desire for somebody to purchase with their want or desire to commit to you long term in a proactive and positive partnership. I think those two are two distinctions and very definitive ways in which we can think about this activity, but we should not conflate the two. So how do we actually think about this? Well, for me today, loyalty happens when a customer sees and acknowledges your relationship with them as just or more valuable than the products or services you provide. So as a result, they're willing, without prompting, to consistently buy, share, promote, and partner with you. And I want you just to notice something here, just as you're looking at this, that there are four specific things that are happening within loyalty that are important for us to capture. One, there is perception. So it's when a customer sees it, acknowledges there's a value perception that's happening there. There's an emotional piece in there in terms of the relationship. There are actions. They're willing to do these things, and there are behaviors: consistently buying, sharing, promoting. When you break these things down, they actually become specific areas that we can begin to look at very proactively and measure within the business. And we'll come to some of those specific ideas in just a moment. So it's often, I guess, perhaps not understood, but there are different types of loyalty that we can actually experience. And actually, as consumers ourselves, we will fall into one or perhaps sometimes more of these specific buckets. But we need to have a more comprehensive and focused view of loyalty to see a customer's core driver at work. And there are three areas here. So we have what is known as rational loyalty, and this is based on transactions where a consumer is really attractive to specific points, incentives, cost and convenience sits in this specific area. Then we have kind of behavioral loyalty, and this is a customer that has continued to purchase the same products and has had a consistent experience with a particular brand, and now, regardless of convenience, regardless of preference, or if a sale is on, that person now is behaviorally tied to that specific organization. And then we have emotional loyalty. And this is where consumers are buying on storytelling, on trust, on specific values shared with that business, philanthropy, other incentives that are not specifically based on points or on a deal being had. It's based on identity. Now they have a specific identity with that brand and that specific product service that ties them into an emotional commitment with you long term. And these are really important distinctions. And neither are good or bad, because actually, as far as your product or your service is concerned, as far as your company is concerned, you're going to have organizations, you're going to have customers in different buckets across your life cycle with them. Some will come in and say, actually, this is the best deal for us. They start at that rational loyalty. And then over time, they may have this behavioral loyalty, seeing the consistency of what you do and now connecting with you as a brand in a much more meaningful way. And then moving into community, where they have much more of a connected identity to who you are and to what the product actually means to them personally, based on shared values and commitments. And these are really important distinctions. So as we look at these different areas, we have just a ton of research that kind of supports some of the thinking around where we should be focusing our thoughts around loyalty. And one is perhaps the most underused, undervalued, and under leveraged with organizations that I speak with right across the board, internationally and locally. There's a Gartner study that published this particular review, 7,000 consumers across the UK, United States, and Australia. And it showed that loyalty to brand is almost impossible to achieve long-term, consistently, without one key element. And that key element is shared values. Of those consumers who said that they had a strong brand relationship, 64% cited shared values as the primary reason. Why might that be important? Because what consumers overall will adhere to and be connected with are the things that they share as an identity with you, something that is connected to something that is much more than whether or not it serves a very current and present need, or whether or not this is something aligned with the values of who I am as an individual. And these are really important distinctions, and we'll come to how we can connect these in your business also. So here are some brands here that do this really well, that have moved from these areas and now have connected identities with their specific consumers. Tom's Shoes, Lululemon, Starbucks, WeWork. If you walk into those specific organizations and you speak to fans of those brands, you'll find that there are very distinct and specific identities that people will have to it. There's a reason why, for example, Apple, consumers and fans, customers alike, are willing to pay £4,000 or £5,000 for a laptop, which is literally almost 100 to 250 times most of the brands out there on, I guess, objectively, very, very similar specs. There is a specific identity tied to the relationship with those brands. And so how do we activate this kind of loyalty, that moves people from not just that rational loyalty, not just behavioral loyalty, but into emotional loyalty? Well, this is where the concept of unshakable loyalty comes from. And the big premise is this. What is unshakable loyalty? Well, it's your ability to create positive and impactful customer experiences that connect customer shared values that establishes future commitments. And that shows up in a variety of different ways. We're going to be exploring 3 specific activators to unshakable loyalty that, when put into a program view, a view of the customer that moves them in a specific journey that's engineered not necessarily for renewal, but for a specific continuity of future commitments, of shared values, we start to see retention, attrition come down. We start to see lifetime value skyrocket and profitabilities go up at the same time. So let's look at our 3 unconventional approaches to customer attrition retention that I believe are going to be really valuable to you. So number 1, let's talk about the endowed progress effect. I'm not sure if you ever heard of this specific thing, but it's really powerful. So the endowed progress effect is an idea that if you provide some type of artificial advancement toward a goal, a person will be more motivated to complete that goal. Well, where does that actually come from exactly? Well, it happened as part of this. Now, there's a recent study by Professors Joseph Nunes and Xavier Drazer, and they analyzed how artificial advancements affects customer effort when it comes to perceived value and loyalty. And they called this the endowed progress effect. Now, these 2 professors began their study with the assumption that customer loyalty programs could persuade customers to stick around for a little bit longer, right? And buy more often. But in all tests, they found if customers were given a comparative head start in reaching their goals, specific payoffs, what took place was that specific consumer, that customer, was more or significantly more likely to continue the relationship and buying more frequently at a higher level with that business. So in this example, they did one particular test with a car wash. And so they hypothesized this, and they took out literally 300 loyalty cards, and they were given to customers at a car wash. And they were all told that they would have the card stamped the next time for a free car wash. Group 1 were given empty cards requiring 10 stamps. Group 2 were given cards with 2 slots already stamped, and only 8 more stamps were required. So in group 1, 19% of the cards were filled to get a free car wash. In group 2, 34% were filled in because of the comparative head start that they had. Simply by stamping a specific card, seeing that visually for the customer, they were almost 2 times more likely to come back and buy more at a higher frequency than the previous group. So why is this important? Well, it's all about perceived progress. The customer has already had a benefit and emotional payoff and reward before even taking any specific action. So apart from agreeing to take the card, this is something that you could apply in so many different aspects of the business. That way, just to think about this for a moment. Where could you provide artificial advancement for your client where they can see a specific benefit in a very clear journey to a specific result without engaging with you commercially yet? And that could be something as simple as showing a roadmap and giving them a view that actually already within their services, they've actually acquired these specific things. This could be a new upgrade. It could be a new opportunity to scale something in their business that's available to them. And all they need to do is take this step in order to acquire that thing, but it's already available to them. And there's so many different examples, literally hundreds across B2B, B2C that you can take to apply this. But hey, it will be specific and it will be different for you directly. But this particular proposition, this opportunity for the endowed progress effect can be very, very powerful. So here's some actions to really think about. So setting a goal for your customers to achieve, deciding what the action will be, and then pitching the artificial advancement, but giving a clear reason why. So in the car wash example, it was, hey, you can get more or a better car wash since you now have this specific advancement. We've actually given you some stamps in advance. We've added this much level of value that you would pay for this car wash. And now all you need to do is to take a specific step. So that is a really powerful one. So again, I'm going to encourage you to also kind of put your questions in the chat as we go along, because I want to make sure that we bring some of these examples and we can apply it to your business directly. So that's the endowed progress effect. Let's talk about number 2 for really reducing attrition is killing curiosity. So killing curiosity is about this. It's about becoming the center place for conversations about trends, problems, and solutions within your customer's business. Now, here's what's interesting, right? If you think about organizations like YouTube, Amazon, Google, these types of organizations have become what I call curiosity killing companies. They put up such value and trust with their customers that even when there are legitimate alternatives out there, their customers go to them first if they don't currently provide that service. Now, you can become this to your customers, but the first hurdle is getting out of a fear mindset. And we'll come to that in just a second. But here's where we can begin. Let me offer an example here of what this might look like. So today, Salesforce runs Dreamforce and happens every single year. What most people don't know, though, is that Salesforce are spending over $1 billion to put other people in front of their customers, which they may seem a bit odd, but actually what they've recognized is that they've become something more to their customers. They have to become the conduit for where insight and information lives. So to be the one to educate and illuminate trends, new ideas to their customers, and they're not afraid to put things out there that actually aren't necessarily part of their ecosystem directly. Actually, it's something that other people bring to the table. So how can we take this specific invention and say, well, how do we kill curiosity? Meaning, how do we take the desire for our customers to know what's out there, to see what they may be missing, that kind of fear of missing out, and apply that in a way in which we then become a center for conversation that they can have to explore those ideas, even if we don't provide that specific service. Because what can actually be something that really gets in the way of really improving retention attrition is lack of insight, of lack of clarity on what's actually out there. Now, when the competition goes to pitch your client and tells them what's available to them, they then start to doubt the level of value and currency and relevancy of your services. But if you become that kind of curiosity killing company, providing the platform for conversation around those things, you can then mitigate the risks around that. But there are some things to consider I think are important. And that is this fear versus growth mindset. So you have some companies who are on this reactive fear mindset, which says, hey, we don't want to promote the competition. We only want to tell our customers about the risks. We only want to bring our propositions first. We only want to just think about what we can add to our own roadmap, what we can't bring to our roadmap. But instead, those growth organizations, those organizations that have phenomenal loyalty, think in a different way. They're thinking, well, let's ensure our clients are the most informed in their market. Let's show we're partners that are looking out for their future, their interests. Let's co-create with our customers. Let's evaluate the desire and benefits for the customers before allocating any specific spend. And this is the kind of organization you could become in very simple ways, simply by choosing to become the conduit for insight and information about what's happening in your client's market. So how can you do this? Some really simple things. Understand the trends, what's taking place, track the risks, understanding what those things are. So if we're talking about kind of current trends in the industry, this could be, a trend could be voice analytics. And you could have a company that's doing amazing work in that. The market proposition might be, okay, replacing your current phone systems to reduce costs, whatever those might be. You look at some of the trends, what's happening, what are the propositions out there? You're looking at the opportunities. If any of this can bring your business and your customer specific value, maybe commercial value or social benefits. Then you're looking at the risks. What risks, if any, could this bring to your business and to your customer? list the kind of the cost to operational risks, and then take some actions. Think about how you can do that collaboratively and create the space for conversation with your client also. Number 3, be remarkable. This may sound like it's just, hey, a matter of fact, but actually how often are we thinking about how remarkable we are to our clients? And so let me offer this. Seth Godin describes being remarkable as something worth talking about, worth noticing, something that is exceptional. And every organization knows that they are striving to do a great job for their clients. But how often do we actually ask ourselves the question, are we being remarkable? And so how do we think about this? Well, it's not about getting people to stay. It's not a question about, hey, how can we get our clients to stay? It's about creating an environment where our customers never want to leave. And I had that particular experience at Disney. I'm a dad of 6. And so I remember us being at a specific Disney resort and the experience being such that we focused so much on the children, it became easier for us to enjoy what we were doing. And the whole experience became something that we genuinely didn't want to leave, but I had to simply by want of our time being up. But how can you begin to create that for your own clients? Well, let me offer kind of this example with IKEA, which is a known brand to so many people. Well, they've begun to master this. And over the last, I'm going to say 10 years, most people wouldn't necessarily know this, but actually for every IKEA location, they didn't always have, specific restaurant facilities, and the actual layouts of the IKEA used to be different in terms of how they put things together in terms of products and lines of products and services. But they began to really think about this in terms of how could this experience specifically drive something that is remarkable and leads to not only kind of greater kind of attrition or retention of customers, so they're coming back more often. But how do we do this so actually we're actually creating more fans, more members? And so in the implementation of simply putting in facilities that supported families and those people who were going through a particular journey in the IKEA store, they saw 33% of all non-member IKEA customers becoming customers after visiting their store. These are people who perhaps come to IKEA on occasion, maybe I've never taken out a membership before, but I'm simply on going through the experience and a question being asked at the actual cash register itself by employees. And the question was this: if you have not had an experience that's 9 or above, please let us know. And we'd love to ensure that you can get the full benefits from IKEA. Can we give you this card to ensure that you can get those benefits? And all of a sudden, I thought for every interaction going through that, they had 33% of people. These are phenomenal numbers. There are very few companies in the world, a small percentage that are getting these kinds of numbers. But once you choose to be remarkable and you set up an experience, the request or the ask from a client to do something new, to do something specific, to do something that is in line with what their objectives are, becomes so much easier once you know how to set that up. But I want to talk to you about something that's even more nuanced within that, and that is something called story 1 and story 2. Now, story 1 and story 2 is really simple. The story 1 is the story in their head of the experience with your service or product. Story number 2 is the story in the head of your relationship with them as it relates to the value and impact and relevance of your services. I had this experience when I was in Senegal, a place called Gorée Island. That story 1, that product, was a guy named Steven. And I remember kind of turning up to this particular island, and there were so many people out there, like people just hustling, selling their products and services. But I came into his store and he began to ask me some questions specifically around, hey, my family, where I came from, why I came to the island. And as I was speaking with him, he began to actually paint out this particular tapestry and started to design this picture that included my entire family and a backdrop of a beautiful sunset within this African savanna on a river. And he was building this out of that first story of understanding who I was and what experience I was actually looking for while I was there on the island. Now, instantly, that relationship changed between myself and that individual. One, because he connected the shared values of what I was connecting with him and the answers I was giving him, but equally, he was turning that specific information into something that was realized as a product for me directly. It became more valuable, more impactful, and even more relevant. And I still speak about him today, and actually have referred so many people to go and see him, and they've bought from him since. And this is literally years and years and years later. I still remember that experience. So how can we begin to think about that remarkability? Well, a couple of things. Don't ask, what do we do? Don't ask, what do we do to go and retain this client? Think about what influences the result. What gets you to that specific place of retention? If you're focused on the activity, you almost always miss the opportunities to figure out exactly what makes meaning happen between you and your customer, what makes meaning happen between you. And so the big thing here is this, particularly if you're thinking about the measures that you put in place on trying to capture feedback with the client. What influences the journey to the result? What is the leading indicator here? What are the things that we need to track up front that moves us to that particular outcome? Take a step back and say, not just what do we do, but what influences the result? And you'll find yourself in a much stronger position. Lastly, let's just recap a couple of things here. Know what kind of loyalty you're activating. Rational loyalty, behavioral loyalty, and emotional loyalty all come with varying different things. If you're just primarily providing incentives and discounts, you're going to get somebody who's moving into that rational loyalty place. They may move to behavioral loyalty later on, as long as they have a consistency, but you need to be really clear with what kind of loyalty you're activating. Choose to activate unshakable loyalty by using those 3 unconventional areas. Now, these are just 3 of 7 that you could use, but you can start thinking about sharing customer progress, being the center of conversation, and being remarkable. So those are things that I'd share with you up front. Have a think about those. And remember, actually, as part of that, happy for you to kind of, if you just kind of throw your link in the chat or kind of speak to Flavia, or what it might be, we can send you the complete, literally kind of download of 7 activators to Unshakable Loyalty, so you can have that with your teams and your business as well. But thanks for listening. Hopefully that's been valuable to you, and definitely go out and start to become unshakable to your customers.
Oh my, that was amazing, Jermaine. I absolutely loved the story about Gory Island. I think it's such an amazing way of portraying what can go right when you're thinking about building that very personalized story. We have quite a few questions from our companies, and I think that they're just going to build on the amazing insight and such a unique way of presenting what companies should be doing. I'll start with the first one. We deal with a lot of companies, new emerging brands in our market. They could be producing anything from skincare to maybe food products, to pet products, and many of them really focus on acquiring more and more users. That is their core focus. That is what many investors really look forward to. And that is what the sort of measuring thing for the industry. What can they do even at the very earliest stages when they're planning, maybe even before the launch of their first product, to just ensure that they have this attrition, the retention, the value creation at the core? What are the sort of maybe 3 steps that any founder, even when they don't have all the resources, they can put in place?
Yeah, so I think it begins with asking the question, what do we actually want most from the relationship with our clients? So I think starting from that premise, so every organization is going to have kind of revenue goals directly, but your revenue goals are going to be tied to the effectiveness of your engagement, both externally in the acquisition of clients, clearly, but most importantly in the retention of those customers. So you need to be determined primarily with a clear focus on what is the highest possible value we can actually deliver to our clients, and what kind of relationship do we actually want, and then what would need to be true for that relationship to be realized throughout the life cycle of this specific relationship. And so once you've begun to ask those questions, what's going to happen is from those different inferences, you're going to get particular ideas and principles that will come out of that will kind of shape your standards for what you engage in within the business, but ultimately the strategies you may need to deploy to support those specific goals. So a really quick example might be, okay, we want the relationship to be this. We want our relationship with our clients to be one that is based on community. We want to have, at least 20 to 30% of our customers engage with us within our products on a month-to-month basis. And these may be kind of really big goals that you may have. 20, 30% is a big number across any regard and any industry. But you have to start with something, because the standards you set become the standards that you actually adhere to inside the business. So when you shape your standards, you actually change. When you change your standards, you change your results. And so you need to think about what is the standard of service and relationship that we want, and that then determines the standard and qualitative view of the activities that you do inside the business.
That's amazing. Okay, so now let me just delve a little bit deeper. What are the things that you're seeing within newer companies that causes most of the loss? Is it because they don't have a specific story of their brand identity, or are there very simple things that actually they're just doing in such a wrong way because they never thought about them until they have a company?
Yeah, I think part of that is sometimes familiarity. Sometimes we can become so familiar with our customer that we assume that we know something when actually that thing isn't true. And so that familiarity actually becomes the killer for our own misconceptions. And so the big thing here is to challenge our own assumptions and say, well, actually, what do we know about our customers today that informs and supports the way we serve them? And how can we go and check and verify that? And what is it that we don't know about our customers that if we did know, actually it would completely transform the way we thought about or engage with our customers? And what do we need to know right now that actually, if we did know right now, would then support this specific activity? So if you begin to ask those questions and challenge assumptions, I think that is the primary mechanism, just challenging assumptions and staying humble enough to ask the question, but confident enough to go and do the activity, knowing that you're going to do a good job for your customers.
Yeah. Oh my, you're so right. Okay, so now we figured out what companies could potentially be doing wrong, and you're absolutely right. Misconceptions or assuming that you know something that might not necessarily be this, obvious, or might not be verified by speaking with the actual customer or customer group. I think it's a very important point. In our business, we look after companies that are 100% digital, and then companies that have a hybrid presence. They might have an in-store or retail presence as well. And my question here is, what should these two different types of companies do? Is it one more complex than the other? So if you're digital, maybe it's a little bit easier because you can automate a lot of the communication, the value add, the messaging, or is it more complex to do this in person when they actually experience your brand when they're going shopping or when they're going in a large center for a number of different reasons?
Yeah, so I think there's a big argument around proximity and what proximity actually means. So I'll take some research from a company called Simpler, which is an organization that does a lot of research specifically on the B2C market. And what they have demonstrated is that when you do have, they call it a proximity mix, which essentially is having areas where you are in physical proximity with the customer and have digital multiplicity across multi-channel, you actually see retention go up in terms of the retention of clients go up, and you see profitability go up because now you have greater familiarity. And when you have those two proximities working together, you can see those tangibly go up over time. And there's some interesting research around that. Now, that being said, because we're now in a particular age where that kind of digital landscape is much more familiar with most demographics across most, even kind of cultures, because I've been across 33 different countries. really kind of looking and seeing how people engage with customers, and we're seeing these same trends right across the board digitally. I'd say that the first conversation to take place is not necessarily whether or not I'm doing digital, whether or not something can or can't be automated. It's understanding where are the places in our business that we can have an exceptional moment with a client, and how do we create the space for that to happen in the most effective manner. So in one phrase, it might be, where can we humanize the exceptional and automate the predictable? So those things that are more predictable, more administrative, things that perhaps don't need the same amount of organizational spend, operational cost around people and so forth, where can we kind of automate that predictability? But where should we humanize the exceptional pieces? Where do we need to actually place in intentionally those places that influences the relationship of moving us from rational loyalty into more emotional loyalty, of creating those connected community moments? So I think that's a more helpful question to begin with before even thinking about whether or not you need to automate or not automate something.
I think that the automation comes from the fact that in every single brand nowadays is being compared to the net promoter score of Amazon or many other systems, where it's just such a science to making that experience from the moment you go onto the website or the app or engage with a specific product to the moment that it's in your hand. I think that was the consideration. How important is from that process of onboarding and converting?
A lot of people have talked about the first 100 days, and that's now become a primary number. That first 100 days with the customer is super important. And if we are talking about kind of this NPS thing, I think it's important to also recognize that NPS is really helpful, but it's not necessarily an indicator for future behavior. It tells you something that's happening right now, but we need to start putting in different measures that give us a different indication for future commitments. And so some of those things also you can have as NPS, but you need to think of it as a wide variety of inputs needed to really understand the behavioral mix of the clients. That could be things from repurchase ratios to upsell ratios to customer lifetime value, of course, customer loyalty indexes, customer engagement scores. So you can have a whole mix of things that kind of give you a behavioral identity of a client that gives you a higher likelihood of a long-term commitment. So I think what I advise is saying, look, I recognize NPS for a lot of companies. These are going to be evaluated in the boardroom. These are going to be evaluated with investors. I get it. But for you, practically speaking, if you want to evidence loyalty, you need to think about it in a much broader view and getting a behavioral mix of inputs that help you to give you greater confidence of knowing where to place your energy, time, and investment.
I got it. That makes perfect sense. One final question for me, and this is really about attrition and loyalty. And sometimes I guess that we're using them interchangeably. Are they the same? Or are they very different facets of the same experience? One being attrition, more quantitative, and loyalty being one that is about qualitative experiences. So how should founders look at these two terms, and how they should think about them when they're planning their business, or they're planning specific events, or thinking intentional experiences for their customers?
Yeah, so I like the distinctions that you've made. I'd say from a measure perspective, I say, retention is not renewal necessarily, although they can be correlated together. One can cause the other. But I'd say that retention primarily as a function or a strategy inside the business is there primarily to support lifetime value management. Whereas in loyalty specifically is there to increase the profitability of your engagements and the long-term success with clients over time. And it's not necessarily tied specifically to lifetime value. So let me give a different distinction here. So retention primarily is focused on a very specific period in time. It's saying, okay, we have a subscription that's paid per month, and we're looking at these specific numbers on a month by month and see how many we retain. It's very much a a tactical piece on a day-to-day basis that a lot of people think about. But actually, if you think about loyalty itself, loyalty is a way for you to think about, I think, two specific areas. So one, when you think about loyalty, it encompasses the whole advocacy of how you build in community and connection with a client over time. Whereas in retention specifically is focused on how do we serve how do we meet a particular expectation with a client that serves a means of giving them confidence that you're actually okay, you're safe to make this extra purchase tomorrow. So you have the activities, which is our day-to-day engagement, which either confirms a positive understanding of your business or reinforces a negative aspect of your business in the interactions with your business. That impacts the day-to-day view of a customer in terms of what they're going to purchase with you today. Loyalty is much more expansive, and it focuses on the overall success of customers and your success of the customers long-term as a business. Now, it can significantly impact and does significantly impact retention, but they need to be thought about differently. Retention primarily is a function of how do we demonstrate to this business that we are still safe to use and safe to partner with as an organization. Loyalty says, this is why you should keep and establish a future commitment with us long-term. Community and connection, retention primarily is around the focus on building confidence and safety with the customer.
Amazing. Well, Jermaine, I think we've reached all the questions that we've had from our companies. I'm very grateful, and I feel that I've learned so much in this session. I think that we should discuss a lot more about attrition, loyalty, kind of intentional experiences that we really want to offer our founders. I don't think that this is a topic that is touched as much as, let's say, user acquisition or growth rates. So I'm very grateful that you've joined us, and definitely we'll share the free ebook that you have for our companies and our ecosystem. So we'll make sure that everybody gets a copy. Jermaine, thank you so much for joining me. Amazing session as always. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, great to be here with you. Thanks so much, Flavia.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.